They were the couple everyone envied, unstoppable, joyful, and in love. Their bond seemed unbreakable, a love story that made everyone believe in happily ever after. But what should have been a celebration of life turned into something far darker, something that would haunt everyone who watched. It started with a livestream podcast, an intimate moment shared with thousands. What began as a quiet night, filled with laughter and light, suddenly erupted into chaos. The screen went dark, the sounds of joy twisted into screams, and the world was left in shock, wondering, how did love become a death sentence? And what secret did their killer, living just a few feet away, know that would destroy them all? How does a relationship built on trust and passion unravel so violently? How does a life, once so full of promise, end in a tragedy so horrific that it leaves the entire community questioning everything they thought they knew? This is the story of how love collided with a dark legacy, a legacy so twisted that it would tear apart everything in its path. A story of betrayal, obsession, and a shocking revelation that no one saw coming, least of all the couple at the heart of it all. What happens when the greatest threat doesn't come from outside, but from within? Before we dive deeper into this chilling case, like this video and subscribe for more gripping tales of love, lies, and betrayal. LaJoya Bringston was 29, fiery, passionate, and unapologetically bold. She wasn't just a documentary filmmaker. She was a force, an advocate for justice, a woman whose ambition and heart burned with a relentless drive to make the world better. Zamarian Zay Cordell Mays was 32, an ex-Marine turned sound engineer with a calm, steady presence. His past in the military had shaped him into a man of discipline and focus, but it was his quiet love for his community that truly defined him. Together, they seemed like the perfect couple. They weren't just in love. They were a symbol of hope, unity, and what the world could be if people simply took the time to love and understand each other. Their chemistry was undeniable from the moment they met. It was at a Juneteenth rally in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the seeds of something extraordinary were sown. LaJoya was standing at the front of the crowd, her camera rolling as she documented the voices of the people who were demanding justice. Zay was there too, quietly observing, his hands skillfully working the soundboard, capturing the raw emotion of the day. Their eyes met across the crowd, and everything else seemed to fade away. In that moment, nothing else mattered but the connection they shared. It was like they were two halves of a whole, drawn together by fate, each one recognizing in the other the same fire, the same passion, the same unrelenting pursuit of change. The rally was their beginning, and the world would soon come to know their names. Within weeks, they became inseparable, both professionally and personally. Their shared vision for a better world fueled their relationship, making their bond even stronger. LaJoya, with her natural curls bouncing as she spoke, and Zay, with his calm demeanor and magnetic presence, were a perfect pair. One was the storm, the other the calm. Together, they stood as a beacon of love and unity in a world that seemed more divided with every passing day. Their love story became the stuff of legends, shared across social media and celebrated in local communities. LaJoya's followers, numbering in the millions, were entranced by the couple's authenticity, their unwavering support of each other, and their shared vision for a more just society. LaJoya documented their every step. Her voice, both powerful and empathetic, chronicled their journey together, showing the world what it meant to love without fear, to fight for what's right without hesitation. The couple quickly became social media icons, their pictures a testament to the joy that love can bring. Zay would play his music in the background of LaJoya's documentaries, creating a soundtrack to their lives, a partnership so deeply intertwined that it felt like every frame and every note was part of the same story. To their fans, they were the epitome of what love should look like. Their chemistry was electric, their devotion to each other undeniable. A perfect couple, a perfect love story. Their every move was celebrated. The way they laughed together, the way Zay supported LaJoya at every rally, the way she spoke with such clarity and conviction about the causes that meant so much to her. They made the world believe in the possibility of something better. In a time of chaos and division, they were the proof that love could still thrive. But the love story that everyone admired, the love that seemed unbreakable, was only the surface of a much darker reality. They were everything the world needed to see. They were the perfect couple, destined for greatness. At least, that's what everyone thought. But what neither of them knew, what no one could have known, was that their biggest threat wasn't from outside forces. It was living 30 feet away. Arthur Kent Dillard was 64 years old, a man whose presence in the small town of Charlotte, North Carolina, could never be ignored. He was a Vietnam veteran, but the scars he carried were not just from the horrors of war. They were from a deep, festering hatred that had only grown with time. In his mind, the world was changing in ways he couldn't understand, and that change seemed to be embodied in his new neighbors, LaJoya Brinkston and Zamarian Zay Cordell Mays. They were everything Arthur loathed. A black woman and a black man, young and ambitious, fighting for justice in a world he believed was slipping away from him. They were the very symbols of what he saw as an invasion, a threat to the white community he believed should remain untouched, unchallenged. A proud black couple with money, confidence, and joy. Everything Arthur believed didn't belong next door. Arthur's hatred didn't begin with grand gestures. No, it started small, like a slow poison creeping into the ground, unnoticed at first. A noose left hanging from a tree in front of LaJoya and Zay's house, just a symbol, something that might be shrugged off by most, but to Arthur, it was a declaration, a warning. Then came the swastikas, hastily spray-painted on the side of their fence, the unmistakable marks of his hatred that no one could ignore. And as the days passed, Arthur's little acts of malice grew bolder, more grotesque. Animal carcasses, mutilated and left in the yard, became his twisted calling card, a grotesque reminder of the violence that simmered beneath the surface of this seemingly quiet neighborhood. LaJoya noticed it first. The small, unsettling things, the way the air seemed to grow heavier whenever she walked outside, the feeling that someone was always watching. Zay was more focused on his work, his sound engineering, and didn't seem to notice as much, but LaJoya knew something was wrong. She began documenting everything, capturing photos of the noose, the swastikas, the dead animals strewn across their lawn. Her followers watched in horror as she posted about the escalating hate crimes, but most dismissed it as isolated incidents. Some even told her to be patient, that people like Arthur were relics of the past, fading into the background of history. But LaJoya knew better. She could feel the danger growing. The neighborhood, once filled with the sounds of children playing and neighbors chatting over fences, now felt ominous, like a powder keg waiting to explode. She began recording her every step, documenting the hate that seemed to manifest like clockwork. The police were called, of course, but to them, Arthur was just an old man, a relic of a different time. They didn't take him seriously. They saw his past as an excuse. He was a victim of the Vietnam War, they said. But the police gave Arthur Dillard the benefit of the doubt. Just an old man with PTSD, they said. He's harmless. The way he looked at LaJoya and Zay, the way he watched them with eyes full of venom, was dismissed as nothing more than the bitterness of an aging man who couldn't keep up with the world. But LaJoya's gut told her something else. She knew Arthur's obsession was deepening, twisting into something far more dangerous. The way he would watch them from his front porch, his cold eyes never leaving their house, spoke volumes. And there was no one to protect them, no one who truly saw the threat until it was too late. She didn't stop documenting. Every post, every tweet, every video she shared painted a picture of a neighborhood under siege, a community at war with itself. Her followers rallied behind her, but the hate didn't stop. It only grew more intense, more vile. The small acts of terror now felt like an impending storm, each one a raindrop that would eventually drown them all. LaJoya knew the police wouldn't protect them. She knew that she and Zay were facing something darker than they could have ever imagined. But what Arthur didn't know, what he couldn't have possibly known, was that LaJoya's story wasn't just going to be a tale of harassment, it was going to be a warning. The calm before the storm was coming to an end, and when it hit, no one would be prepared for what was about to unfold. The truth was that Arthur Dillard was not just a man consumed by hate. He was a man on the edge, a ticking time bomb in the heart of a community that had no idea how close they were to catastrophe. What no one saw coming was the ritualistic obsession Arthur had built in silence. He kept a notebook, dozens of pages detailing his hatred for the couple, their routines, the groceries they bought, what time LaJoya walked her pit bull, Sojourner, the songs Zamarian played in the garage when he worked on his podcast. He wasn't just angry. He was preparing for war. One night, during a blackout caused by a powerful storm, Arthur struck. It was the kind of night that felt like a movie. The sky was black as ink, thunder rolling like distant drums of war, lightning slashing the sky in jagged white veins. Trees bent under the weight of violent winds. The city was swallowed by darkness, streetlights flickered, transformers burst, and power lines snapped like twigs. But inside one small, candlelit home in East Atlanta, there was peace. There was love. There was LaJoya and Zamarian, smiling into a camera, wrapped in each other's glow. Their podcast, Black Love and Legacy, was live. Hundreds of viewers tuned in as the couple talked about vulnerability in Black relationships, about building a legacy of healing through honesty, about surviving trauma without letting it harden you. Zay leaned over to kiss LaJoya's cheek between stories. She laughed, adjusting her gold head wrap. The screen shimmered with hearts and fire emojis. It was intimate, beautiful, a glimpse into something rare, two people who really got each other. Then, at 8:42 p.m., everything changed. The power snapped off like a trap closing. The room dimmed to candlelight. The screen went dark, but the live stream didn't stop. Their silhouettes danced against the flickering flames. You can hear Zay laugh. "Storm's trying to silence us, babe," he says. "But nah, Black love don't break." LaJoya giggles, her voice calm. Maybe the ancestors are here to listen. And then, a sound. A single, unnatural clunk from the back of the house. Zay froze mid-sentence. Sojourner, their dog, started barking, loud and violent. You hear Zay say, "What the hell was that?" Another sound, a shatter. Glass exploding. Then rapid footsteps. That's when the tone of everything shifts. LaJoya screams. Zay yells something, a command? A prayer? No one can tell. The camera tumbles, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The candles tip. The screen fills with shadows. But the audio keeps going. You can hear Arthur Dillard's entrance without ever seeing his face. It's the sound of calculated destruction, fast, deliberate. A door is kicked open. Furniture is overturned. Sojourner's barking turns to whimpers, then silence. The live stream records everything. The chaos, the shouts, the sobs. Then, gunfire. The first shot. Sharp. Echoing. LaJoya's scream cuts through the static like a blade. The second follows. Then a third. Zay is yelling, "Get behind me! Get behind me!" Another shot. Something breaks. A table, maybe a body. And then silence. A long, suffocating silence. Viewers, thousands of them, stared at their phones and laptops in stunned disbelief. Some thought it was an elaborate performance. Others thought they had just witnessed a crime. But nobody moved. Nobody clicked away. Until the fifth gunshot cracked through the stillness. Slower. Colder. Execution style. That's when people started calling 911. But it was already too late. 36 hours passed before the police arrived. The storm had wrecked the grid, and the neighborhood was still dark. But by then, the live stream had already gone viral. TikTok clips, Twitter reposts, Instagram reels. 1 million people watching a love story turn into a nightmare, and nobody knowing for sure what was real. When officers entered the home, it was like walking into a horror film frozen mid-scene. The door had been left cracked open. The wax from melted candles had hardened across the carpet. There was blood on the walls, on the floors, soaked into the couch. LaJoya was found first, bound with duct tape, shot twice in the back. She had been trying to crawl, trying to get to the door. Her nails were broken. her face frozen in terror. Zamarian was found next. He had shielded her, even as he was dying. Shot in the chest. One bullet through the eye. His arm was still stretched out across her back, as if he believed he could still save her, as if he refused to let her go. In the basement, behind a toppled shelf, Sojourner. Alive. Bruised. Whimpering. Covered in blood that wasn't just his own. Arthur Dillard didn't run. He lingered. After executing LaJoya and Zamarian in cold blood, he didn't panic. He returned to the scene like it was his own stage, rewriting a narrative no one asked for, one built on hatred, delusion, and lies. He moved with the arrogance of someone who believed he'd already won. Arthur tried to frame the couple as criminals. First, he planted drugs around their home, crushed opioids spread across the kitchen counter, prescription bottles shoved half open into drawers, loose baggies thrown near the laundry hamper. Then he staged a robbery, drawers overturned, picture frames shattered, and a living room window carefully broken from the inside out. As a final theatrical touch, he stabbed a fake Antifa flag into the drywall with a kitchen knife, smearing red paint to mimic blood. It was cartoonish, chaotic, and deliberate. He wanted the world to see LaJoya and Zamarian not as victims of murder, but as a radical, drug-addicted couple who invited destruction upon themselves. He counted on bias. He counted on assumptions. He thought people would look at two dead black bodies and fill in the blanks with stereotypes. But what he didn't know was that the live stream hadn't ended. Even after the lights went out, even after the screen went black, the audio kept rolling. Every sound in the house, every boot step, every breath, every hateful whisper was recorded. Millions had heard the screams. But now they heard the aftermath, the crack of breaking glass, the rifling through drawers, the soft sound of duct tape being peeled and torn. Arthur's voice mumbling as he staged the flag. "This'll confuse him," he said. "Make him look like the enemy." He had no idea the world was still listening. When investigators arrived, they were briefly misled, just as Arthur hoped. Drugs on the counter, broken glass, a home torn apart. But it didn't take long before the raw livestream footage surfaced. Viewers who had tuned in days earlier had saved it, shared it, dissected it. Internet sleuths compared timelines, matched sounds, enhanced audio. The police didn't have to dig. The evidence came straight to them. Suddenly, the lie unraveled. What looked like a break-in was exposed as post-murder staging. The Antifa flag? A hoax. The window? Smashed to fake entry. And the drugs? Planted after the fact. The truth screamed louder than any of Arthur's theatrics. His undoing was his arrogance. For days after the murders, police caught up with him at a local gas station. Arthur wasn't hiding in some remote cabin. He was in plain sight, sipping coffee, filling up his old Dodge truck like he hadn't just orchestrated a double homicide. When police approached, he didn't resist. He smiled like someone who thought the world still didn't understand. "I did it," he said. "Reclaimed the land from savages." The words stunned even the officers. This place was rotting from the inside out. He ran it as they cuffed him. They were part of the disease. Black love? Please. That was propaganda. I gave the land back to God. There was no remorse. No guilt. Just twisted righteousness. He thought he was doing something holy. But what he did was a documented murder, broadcast to the world in real time. The story he tried to fabricate collapsed under the weight of his own voice. And with his arrest, the truth was restored. What happened next stunned the nation. During the trial, the courtroom proceedings were expected to be intense, but no one was prepared for the bottomless horror that would unfold. What started as a murder trial quickly turned into something far darker, a full-blown excavation of a man's diseased mind, his violent legacy, and the years of hatred he had hidden behind a neighborly smile and a church-going facade. It began with a single binder, black leather, warped at the edges, and sealed with a rusted latch. Inside, prosecutors revealed, was a manifesto so vile it chilled the blood of even the most hardened officers. The title, Reckoning for the Purity. It was 173 pages of unfiltered white supremacist doctrine, part diary, part terrorist blueprint. Arthur Dillard had spent over 2 decades writing it, planning, cataloging, naming names. The manifesto described a vision of a restored America cleansed of what he called diseased elements. Jews, Muslims, LGBTQ+ people, immigrants, but above all, Black Americans. He referred to them not as humans, but as cultural invaders and biological threats. In meticulous handwriting, he outlined cleansing zones, organizing neighborhoods into colored maps. And on page 42, under a section titled Subversives to Neutralize, were the full names of LaJoya Reeves and Zamarian Tate. He had surveilled them for months, downloaded every podcast episode, screen-recorded their live streams, drove past their home, marked their routines, and in his basement, what investigators later called the cell, Arthur had constructed something unholy. It was soundproofed with insulation. The walls were covered in blood-stained tarps. Bolted into the floor were rusted chains and iron rings. Hanging from the ceiling, meat hooks. A metal table sat in the middle, stained, scorched, and surrounded by surgical tools. One of the lead detectives wept openly on the stand describing it. Arthur had called it his truth room. It was where he planned to interrogate traitors. But none of that prepared the court for what came next. Arthur's estranged daughter, Melissa Dillard, entered the courtroom with visible anxiety, hands trembling, eyes swollen from crying. She hadn't seen her father in nearly a decade. When she took the stand, it was as if the oxygen left the room. Melissa spoke softly at first. The details she shared felt ripped from a psychological horror film. She explained how Arthur raised her in isolation. No birthday parties, no friends, no internet. Just sermons. Revealed that Arthur had been grooming her as a child to be a pure breeder. She wasn't allowed to speak to anyone outside of their church. She wasn't allowed to watch television unless it was a documentary about heritage wars. But it got worse. Melissa testified that, as a teen, when she developed a crush on a Black classmate and was caught passing him a note in school, Arthur locked her in the cellar. No food, no light. Just a Bible, a jug of water, and a speaker that played lynching reenactments on a loop. He carved the word defiler into the back of one of her shirts and made her wear it for a week. When she finally escaped at age 17, she ran so far she changed her name and vanished into another state. Until the murders. Until she saw the news. Until she heard about LaJoya and Zay and recognized the same doctrine from her childhood hidden beneath the headlines. Her testimony broke the court. Jurors were seen openly sobbing. One had to excuse herself. The judge declared a recess, unable to continue. Court officers escorted people out, shaken and pale. When proceedings resumed, Arthur was given a chance to speak. He stood without hesitation, and instead of remorse, he gave defiance. "I did my duty," he said, staring directly into the courtroom cameras. "You can put a rope around my neck or a needle in my arm. Doesn't matter. My bloodline is clean. My mission is eternal." Then he turned to Melissa and said, "You were supposed to carry it forward." The gasps were audible. Reporters dropped pens. One juror fainted. And then came the final blow. The judge sentenced Arthur Dillard to death by lethal injection, making him the first person in North Carolina history to receive the death penalty under the newly revised 2024 hate crime legislation. As Arthur was led away in shackles, he looked over his shoulder, grinned, and gave a slow, deliberate salute. But no one saluted back. Because in that moment, Arthur Dillard became what he had always feared becoming, a relic of a dying hate, dragged into the light and buried under truth. His war ended not with a bang, but with the voices of the very people he tried to silence rising louder than ever. Justice, the long in coming, had arrived. By the time Arthur Dillard's execution date was announced, the world thought they had seen the darkest parts of the story. But what came next proved that evil leaves roots. Deep, tangled, and sometimes still growing. 2 weeks before the scheduled execution, a package arrived at the home of Kenesha Brinkston, LaJoya's older sister. No name, no note, just a brown box sealed with heavy tape. Inside was a rusted key, a childhood photo of LaJoya with a red, X scrawled over her eyes, and a USB flash drive wrapped in butcher paper. The drive contained a single file labeled Confession. The video opened in Arthur Dillard's basement. He stood in the center of the frame, a Confederate flag draped over his shoulders, eyes locked on the camera. Behind him, a wall covered in Polaroid photos, some faded, some freshly marked with names, dates, and numbers. For 17 long seconds, he said nothing. Then his lips curled into that same twisted smirk he wore in court. They think I only killed the in backslash asterisk backslash asterisk backslash asterisk backslash asterisk RS next door, he muttered. They don't know I've been cleansing for decades. He walked to a deep freezer in the corner. Opened it. Inside were human bones. Child-sized shoes. A decaying stuffed doll. A pink hair clip. It was no longer just a hate crime. Arthur Dillard was a serial killer. He began reciting names, Black and Latino children who had gone missing over the last 30 years. Names police had written off as runaways. Names their families had never stopped praying over. He described how he lured them, how he baptized them in fire and bleach, and how he freed them from impurity. But what came next shattered every remaining illusion. Arthur leaned into the camera and whispered, LaJoya wasn't random. I knew her mother. Intimately. Then he smiled again. Check the blood. The video ended in static. But the truth had already begun unraveling. A court-ordered DNA test confirmed it. Arthur Dillard was LaJoya Bringston's biological father. Back in 1994, during a riot he helped instigate, Arthur had raped her mother, Sorrel Bringston, while posing as a law enforcement agent for a white supremacist militia. Sorrel never told a soul, not even her daughters. She'd carried the shame in silence for decades. Arthur knew all along. Killing LaJoya wasn't just an act of racial hatred. It was a twisted finale, his way of erasing the living proof of his own sins. His own daughter. The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom, the city, the country. People who had marched for LaJoya now marched in rage. Families of other missing children came forward. Investigators reopened dozens of cold cases. Protesters demanded answers from the institutions that had enabled a monster to hide in plain sight for 3 decades. Kenesha, holding that torn photo of her sister, gave a statement to the press. He didn't just murder her. He hunted her, raised her just to destroy her. And the system helped him do it. But the story didn't end there. Months after Arthur Dillard's conviction and death sentence, a journalist digging through old archives stumbled on something that cracked the entire case wide open again. It turned out Arthur hadn't just been some isolated racist or deranged extremist. He had been a confidential informant for a white nationalist militia back in the early 1990s. The group, known privately as the Fold, operated quietly and surgically, embedding their members in law enforcement, government, and even public schools. They weren't just hiding behind badges. They were the badges. And Arthur? He was one of their most trusted assets. In 1994, during the same protest where LaJoya's mother had been assaulted, Arthur was working undercover for the Fold, instigating violence, gathering names, intimidating organizers. His hands were bloodied long before the murder that shocked the nation. And here's where it gets even darker. LaJoya Bringston had been planning a documentary. A searing, unapologetic exposé of systemic racism within the city's police department, featuring whistleblowers, hidden records, and damning interviews. She was weeks away from launching the project. Arthur found out. Her name, her mission, her fire, it wasn't just a threat. It was a trigger. Arthur Dillard didn't just kill out of hatred. He killed to silence a voice that could have dismantled everything he and his brothers in the Fold had built over the decades. Zamarian was collateral. LaJoya was the target. But what Arthur failed to realize is that silencing one voice only amplifies it in death. Today, the small home where LaJoya and Zamarian once dreamed together has been transformed into a living museum. Inside are pieces of their life, her protest signs, his poetry journals, the outline for her documentary, the dresses she wore in the live streams, and the camera that never stopped recording. It's more than a house. It's a monument to resistance. So ask yourself, what if LaJoya had never picked up that camera? What if Arthur's truth had stayed hidden behind charm and camouflage? Would they still be alive? How many more stories like theirs are waiting to be uncovered? If this story left you stunned, heartbroken, or full of rage, don't look away. Make sure to like, subscribe for more mind-blowing tales of love, lies, and the darkness that hides just behind the front door. Because sometimes the most horrifying stories are the ones that could happen right next door.